Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Tag1 TeamTalk, the vlog and podcast of Tag1 Consulting. I'm Michael Meyers, the Managing Director, and today we're celebrating and looking back on 20 years of Drupal. We're really proud at Tag1 to have many team members that have been part of Drupal for a really long time, including several that have been there since the very beginning. I'm joined today by Doug Green, one of our senior-most team members. I've known Doug for, over a decade, and we've had the opportunity to work together at different organizations. Doug, why don't you give people just a quick background, some of the things you've done in the Drupal community?
Sure. I've been in Drupal, I'd have to look at my profile, 2006-ish time frame. My biggest contribution that most people know about is the coder module, the code review module. After I did that, I was working with views and search type of things around that same time frame. I made some major improvements to the Drupal 6. Was it Drupal 6? Yeah, Drupal 6, the search engine, optimizing the queries. Because of that work, I ended up becoming a maintainer / co-maintainer of the search core module, which was more an honorarium than an actual job I did, because I didn't do a very good job of maintaining, but I was involved with some major improvements to the major and minor improvements to the search core module at that time. I've been a professional or a paid consultant developer in Drupal since that time frame, and every organization I've been with, our philosophy has always been to contribute back to Drupal. So I have tons of commits to lots of different modules, just through patches and my day job.
Do you remember how you first came across and discovered Drupal and why you chose to use it?
Yes, I do. And hopefully Leo back there is not too distracting. Maybe he'll get some.
I want to know if does Leo have any commits?
No. Yeah, as he pushed, I've seen Angie comment about her cat pushing. No. Yeah, I do know how I first got involved in Drupal, and I first got involved in Drupal in 2004. I was politically involved with a candidate that did not win presidency. And I was in Dallas, Texas at the time, and helped form an organization for that candidate. Now, he wasn't the candidate that was using Drupal. Howard Dean was using Drupal, and I was supporting John Kerry at the time. And I helped build an organization of, I don't forget how many people, but it was a pretty big organization in Dallas, Texas. But I did it all by hand. I was writing an HTML, I built a website in HTML. We had a news feed, and the news feed was every night. I went in and I edited the HTML and pulled the news from somewhere else and plugged it in. And after that, I thought there's got to be a better way to do this, to manually editing the website. And I did some research, and I came upon Drupal, and I looked at, I don't remember which ones were at the time, but, the popular CMSs at the time. And I looked at Drupal and I thought this was a good platform. And then out of that experience, I tried to start a company that was building political websites, and I picked Drupal as my platform. And the company was a miserable failure. It had no business. Nobody wanted to pay for political websites, and they certainly didn't want to pay what it cost, but that got me into Drupal.
Wow. Yeah, you reminded me, DeanSpace was sort of a huge catalyst for Drupal, really the first major, website to run Drupal, and it revolutionized American politics online and really jump-started Drupal's success. I didn't know about the whole John Kerry story. That's fascinating.
Yeah. So I didn't do DeanSpace. I wasn't involved with DeanSpace. I wish I kind of had been. It would have been a lot easier, but that was my introduction.
Yeah. Do you remember what your first commit or one of your first commits was?
I had started making a ton of Drupal. Gosh, what are we in now? So I first got involved in Drupal. I remember some of my first early modules, and I remember my first Drupal core commits. My first early contrib modules obviously were before the Drupal core commits. My first Drupal core work was at OSCMS in 2007, I think it was. And OSCMS was DrupalCon before DrupalCon.
It was the open source content management system conference, and it was in California?
Yeah, in California at the Yahoo campus. There were 300 of us. I think 200 of us were Drupalers and 100 were other CMSs. I attended that. This is where I met Jeremy the first time, and I met Charlie for the first time. I attended that. There was a one-day, and I met Narayan there too. There was a one-day paid workshop on performance, and then we had a code sprint. And I was at the code sprint, and like I said, a lot of my work has been paid consulting work. So I was at the code sprint, and I had a lot of paid consulting work to do. So I sat down at a table and started to do my own work. And I thought, this is crazy. I'm at this conference. I should probably do some Drupal work. So I went up to Charlie and I said, what can I do? And I think I told this story on the last podcast, so I won't say it now. But I went up to Charlie and I asked him, for some work, and I did some. It was a big patch that Gabor had made for language, and I started reviewing that and contributing there.
I think one of my favorite things about the early days of Drupal is that conferences like that, we were able to get together and make big decisions about Drupal and big changes. Maybe what core days are now. Now we have 3,000 people instead of 300 people. Fun fact about the OSCMS, that's where Jay Batson met Dries, I believe. That's where I first met Jay Batson. I remember him pulling me aside and saying, I want to start a company around Drupal. And I said, well, you can't do that without Dries. And I didn't think there was a chance in hell that would happen. And I'm really glad that it did. That's pretty amazing. All I remember about OSCMS beyond that is that Google brought us a trunk full of liquor because they were trying to one-up Yahoo for giving us the space. And we had one hell of a party.
I don't remember that, but not because I was drinking, but because I wasn't part of it.
It was definitely a lot of fun. Wow, it's pretty amazing. So looking back, what is there a favorite thing you worked on, or and a least favorite thing you've worked on?
And Michael gave me the questions here to prepare. My favorite thing to work on. It was fun.
You got the most out of, or
it was fun writing Coder at the beginning. All the stuff I enjoy writing code, so solving problems, finding things out. While it's frustrating and banging your head against the wall, it's also kind of fun, to solve things. But a lot of the stuff in the earlier days of Drupal was kind of fun because it was fast moving and you knew you were making an impact. Since this is the second one of these I've done in the last 3 months, I'm not sure if I said this on the last one, but we used to have a developer email list, and there has always been the issue queue, but there was the developer email list. And I don't know how many people were on the email list, but it was kind of a thing that I would read as it came in all the time, and somebody would say, I've got this problem, and then somebody would fix it, and it seemed, I'm an early bird and I'm on the East Coast of the United States. So I kind of felt like I had the first option to fix some things. Somebody in Europe would find a problem, and it wouldn't get it fixed. And I'd wake up at, 5 o'clock in the morning, East Coast time, and I'd try to get it fixed before anyone else in the United States got it fixed. So I could be the one that did it. And it was kind of fun being in that environment where you really felt connected to everything that was going on in Drupal. It kind of reminds me of computer science. There was a time where I thought I could know everything about everything, and my college degree is 1986. Certainly, programming had evolved and there was a lot to know then, but there was a lot less to know then than there is now. Now I've realized you've got to kind of specialize in things. You're not going to know everything about everything. But back then, I remember one particular example where someone gave our octal math was wrong on file permissions, and I tried to fix that very quickly. And again, I think I told this story last time.
I completely forgot about the mailing list. That's crazy. I think like the global nature and like the timing, I just spoke to Catch earlier this morning. I think, we all work together at Examiner.com. I think that was one of the things that really made Drupal 7 happen. We would work, during the day our time. He would get up in the morning his time in Japan at the time and do tons of commits into Drupal 7. And I think that's what led to him becoming the core committer and framework manager for 8, is that he played such an instrumental role in that. So it's pretty interesting how like where you fall in the development cycle could be like a secret for people in the future. Get up early, and make your contributions. So do you have a favorite and a least favorite feature?
No. Not really.
What drives?
I'll get on the soapbox for 30 seconds, and that's I took a long time to come on board to Drupal 8. I remember telling Dries at one point that I thought we were done with Drupal 7. It was perfect. We didn't need to do anything more. And the Drupal 8 development cycle was like 5 years. It was a long time. So from like 2010 to 2015 or 2012 to 2016, I wasn't that involved in the core development. I was still working on Drupal 7. And while Drupal 8, I've been doing Drupal 8 work for 4 or 5 years now. I wouldn't go back to 7. I like it. The least favorite feature is that we lost a lot of the community when we went from 7 to 8. We gained some of the community. Drupal 8 was designed intentionally to try to attract the professional computer scientists, the software developers. It's object-oriented. It is in many ways more pleasant to work in, but we lost a lot of the hobbyists because it's harder to work in.
Yeah.
And we lost a lot of I understand the technical decisions. PHP is an interpretive language. There is technical debt to carry when you have wrapper functions that make things easier. But I'm working with 2 teams right now. One of them is Tag1 and another team. And on the other team, they don't know Drupal 8, and things are a lot harder for them in Drupal 7. And I had someone telling me just this last week, and I tried to get the details if there were any metrics behind it. But what she was saying is she had an actual factor of how much longer it took them to do a Drupal 8 project than a Drupal 7 project. And, it was a factor of 2 or something. It cost a lot more.
Yep. We actually, one of our upcoming team talks, we're doing a brand new Drupal 7 site now, where it's about to start for a major Fortune 500, and there was a lot of debate about it, but they have such a huge investment in the platform. The speed and cost at which they could, churn out a complex 7 site, just outweighed everything. They have Drupal 8 sites. It's not that they can't do 8 and 9. It's just that, it was, we think that, the best and smartest decision, because like you said, 7 is an amazing platform, and with extended support, it's going to be, around for another 5 to 7 years. I think 7 and 8, it's one of the most contentious things that's happened in the community, and I think you're right. The backdrop kicked up. The first time there was a fork of Drupal, and hopefully the last, and a lot of turmoil around it, and there are many advantages and disadvantages to it, and time will tell. So, what do you think the missing feature is? Or, is there something that you wish Drupal did right now that it doesn't, or a feature you've always wanted to have that just hasn't got in there?
Then I'm going to have to say no, I don't know. I love listening to Drees's. I'm not the visionary for a lot of these things.
What about on the projects you're working on? Is there something that is particularly a pain in the ass, or?
Everything. A pain in the ass, because that's what they pay me to do, to fix these things, to figure these things out. The thing I've been working on most recently, that's my most recent pain in the ass, it all comes down to going back to the Drupal 7, 8 thing, and it comes down to what you know, and what you know how to do, and what you got to figure out how to do. And, I think on the Drupal 7, 8 thing, that I think you can do a project just as fast in Drupal 8 if your team is built around Drupal 8 and you have the Drupal 8 tools. So I was brought on to this other project to help with migrations. They had 4 Drupal 8 sites already that need to go to 9. That was simple, but another 6 sites or so that had to go from Drupal 7 to Drupal 9. And they had no Drupal 8 experience on the team. So I had to write a lot of I had to figure out the migration system. And I know that if, Mike Ryan or Moshe had been on our team, they would have been, done it differently and quicker. But I didn't know the migration system. I know Drupal 8, Drupal 9. So the pain in the ass was figuring out how to do these migrations. And every single time, we have to learn. We migrated one site, and then, oh shoot, we, just yesterday, after doing this big migration site that's taken us 3 months and we're going to launch next week, learned that I should have done something different at the beginning that now affects the next migration site. There's just, Drupal's complex now. It's big. There's a lot of parts, a lot of things to know, and I don't know it all. I have to figure everything out, which is, I'm good at figuring things out, but I don't know things off the top of my head.
Looking back on 16 years, Doug, what do you think has been the best part of, being part of Drupal and the Drupal community?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. I wanted to work this in. The best part of being part of the Drupal community is being part of the Drupal community and knowing people like you and being connected to this worldwide developer community, going to conferences, having friends all over the world.
I'm getting all emo. I hear you. Talking to everybody on the team about, their experience and thinking about the fact that we've known each other for so long, and it's mind-blowing. So just to wrap this up, is there anyone that you want to thank, that really got you started? I know there are too many people to thank today, but looking back to the earliest days, anyone or, people that stand out?
I don't know if you remember this DrupalCon. There was a DrupalCon where Dries said, if your life has been changed by Drupal, would you please stand up? And I stood up, and I think half the room or more of the room stood up. So first, it's got to be Dries for starting the thing. And, he didn't know what he was, starting, but he's been, I believe, a good steward of Drupal for us. I got to thank Jeremy because, I've worked for Jeremy for a lot of years, and Jeremy's a good friend. He was an early mentor in the technical side, but on the business side, I can't. And I'm looking forward to, at post-pandemic, being able to go to Italy again and spend some time there.
For everyone listening, Jeremy is the founder of Tag1, and I agree. I'd love to go visit him. I've heard his place in Italy is gorgeous. I agree with you, Doug. I don't think that Drupal could be or would be what it is without Dries. I think that his, nature, it really was a big part of shaping the community and making it what it is. And I think had anybody else started Drupal, I wonder, I don't think it would be what it is today, because the community, and how the community interacts with each other and supports each other is really what, made Drupal what it is today. So,
I want to thank one more person, which is Charlie. And I'm sad that Charlie's not as involved with the community today as he was early on, and the personal things that happened that led to that. He's a good friend, a sweet guy. Some people have seen the other side of that, but his technical contributions. I remember being at OSCMS and my first, and some things there. He was giving a talk on the menu system, and how this was better, and and his technical brilliance. And I've worked with him on a couple of teams. He's got a role to play. If you can turn over a hard problem to him and let him solve it, he'll come up with miraculous solutions. And I always admired how he could solve something in 20 lines of code as opposed to 500.
Chicks is genius. He was my first hire 16 years ago and will forever hold a special place in my heart. The guy is just insanely amazing and dedicated, a very loyal and great friend. I hear you. Doug, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun to look back down memory lane and so many things that I forgot about and appreciate. So thanks for joining us, and look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Will do. Thanks.